The next submission is an oral presentation by Greenpeace Canada as outlined in CMD 15H 2.2A and 2.2B. And I understand Mr. Stensil, you'll make the presentation.
Good morning, bonjour. Thank you for this opportunity to present Greenpeace's view and recommendations on Bruce Power's license renewal request. As you are aware, I sent a letter to the Commission before the Day 1 hearings asking questions related to license compliance and the most recent risk assessments of the Bruce reactors. I'd like to thank Bruce Power for responding to my questions. CNSC staff, however, have not provided any responses. As I will explain in my presentation, staff's failure to respond to these reasonable questions informs the takeaway recommendation I make to you today. That is, before Bruce Power is allowed to rebuild the remaining Bruce A reactors, a public hearing should take place, including both written and oral submissions. The most appropriate way to do this is through a license renewal hearing. I make this recommendation because at these hearings, CNSC staff appear to have either failed to notice or notify the Commission and the public about significant risks to public safety. As I will discuss, the risk of a large early accidental radiation release at the Bruce nuclear station has increased significantly over the past decade. At this level of risk, the station contravenes international and Canadian requirements for new reactor design and off-site emergency planning. As you may recall, there was a similar failure by staff to either notice or notify the Commission of the risks posed by the Pickering reactors in 2013. And as we've discussed many times before, the Fukushima disaster happened because both the station's operator and the Japanese regulator were aware of credible accident risks, but simply ignored them. I worry this is happening at the CNSC. My written submission outlines a series of gaps and loopholes that allow Bruce Power to effectively self-regulate. This exacerbates the problem. These loopholes include allowing licensees to define the risk limits of their facilities, the failure to provide clear and consistent guidance on how external events are included in risk assessments, the failure to establish clear limits on the risk posed by multi-unit stations, and the failure of provincial authorities and the CNSC staff to verify the effectiveness of off-site emergency measures against the risk posed by nuclear stations. In Greenpeace's view, public review and Commission oversight is what's needed to address these weaknesses in the CNSC's regulatory framework in the near term. In the longer term, we need to have additional discussions. Bruce Power's most recent probabilistic risk assessments for the Bruce A and Bruce B stations show the station is much more dangerous than previously thought. On screen, you will see the traditional risk limits for large radioactive releases at Ontario Hydro stations compared to Bruce Power's most recent risk assessments and previous assessments dating back approximately a decade. These numbers are only for internal events. It shows that the most recent risk assessments found that the Bruce A reactors, particularly, have a potential for large radioactive releases that is just below the limit. This limit is the boundary the CNSC and industry have used historically to determine reasonable and unreasonable risk under the Act. So the risk of large accidental radiation releases has increased significantly. That in itself should be studied more closely. However, I think what triggers the Commission's responsibilities most under the Act is that the large release frequency is dominated by releases within the first 24 hours. This contravenes the CNSC's design requirements for new reactors, as well as the most recent European Safety Directive. Ontario's off-site nuclear emergency plans were also designed assuming relatively small and delayed radioactive releases. As I recall, the off-site plans for the Bruce station assume the majority of radioactive releases will be contained for about 2.5 days. In my view, Commission staff have a responsibility under the Act to inform the Commission and the public when a licensee's facility may pose an unreasonable risk to Canadian society. That didn't happen, and this failure to notify the Commission should be factored into your licensing decision. Another issue I asked the Commission to factor into its judgment of the staff's recommendations is their failure to notify the Commission that Bruce Power didn't meet license requirements. As I noted in my February letter, access to information documents show staff acknowledged internally, but not in their submission to the Commission, that Bruce Power had failed to meet its license requirement to submit complete probabilistic risk studies compliant with Guide S294 by December 2013. And here I'm going to slip into what I admit is speculation, but it appears to me that the one-year license extension Bruce Power was given last April was to enable the company to do everything possible to change the findings of their risk assessments and avoid additional regulatory requirements. That is, 2014 was the year of the pencil sharpener. As shown in previous studies, there has been, or slides, there has been a significant increase in the risk posed by the station over the past decade. It was only in July 2014, however, that Bruce Power submitted its complete risk studies, but also included additional risk reduction credits from emergency mitigating equipment to reduce the large release frequency by a factor of about 10. In November, Bruce Power published a public risk summary that included additional analytical enhancements, as well as credit for other future upgrades that reduced the large release frequency at Bruce A by another factor of 10. So Bruce
Mr.
Power...
Stensil, you're just talking a bit too fast.
Oh.
The translators cannot keep up.
Oh.
So if you just can read, and I'll give you a few extra minutes. If you...
That's what I was running against.
Thank you. I don't.
My apologies.
No problem.
Yes, so with analytical enhancements, their large release frequency was reduced by another factor of 10. So Bruce Power managed to reduce their large release frequency from approximately 1e to the 5 to 1e to the 7 through mostly pencil sharpening. Given the aforementioned risks to public safety, I urged the Commission to approach Bruce Power's current results with a skeptical eye. While CNSC staff say in their submissions that Bruce Power submitted their risk studies on time, and those studies have been found to be compliant, I have seen no evidence that they would even have the time to review and approve these studies before February. This is why I asked staff in February for their review schedule for the Bruce risk studies and their results. They have not responded to these questions. That said, it appears to me staff have not carried out a thorough review of Bruce Power's compliance with Regulatory Guide S294. Their submission shows that they have either failed to notice or notify the Commission regarding certain gaps in Bruce Power's compliance with S94. For example, on page 32 of the staff's submission for the Day 1 hearing, it lists the risk assessment methodologies accepted by CNSC staff. There is no Level 2 PSA methodology listed for high winds. Why wasn't this non-compliance mentioned? Did staff fail to notice it or simply fail to notify the Commission? Likewise, S294 requires Bruce Power to prepare uncertainty and sensitivity analysis for its PSAs. In section 3.4 of staff's supplementary submission, it states that Bruce Power is compliant with S294. However, when you look at the high wind PSA submissions for Bruce A and B stations, there is no mention of an uncertainty or sensitivity analysis that I've been able to find, at least. Again, did staff fail to notice this noncompliance, or did they instead fail to inform the Commission? The next issue is less about compliance than acknowledging new data and incorporating the knowledge into current risk assessments. I'm referring here to the Godridge tornado, which was an F3 tornado. Bruce Power acknowledged in its response to my questions that their high wind PSA only considered F2 tornadoes, not a Godridge tornado. Here's the key question for the Commission moving forward. Is it reasonable to exclude such an event that occurred only a few years ago from future risk assessments? Again, all of this underlines my main concern. Why did staff fail to inform the Commission of these gaps in analysis or non-compliance? Did they not notice them or simply not inform the Commission? Either way, it raises questions about the reliability of Bruce's non-compliant risk assessments for decision-making purposes. Aside from non-compliance issues, the rushed and what I would call backroom analytical enhancements, I am very concerned that there has been over the past year an unbalanced approach to risk assessment. Sharpening the pencil is about downplaying the risk posed by the station and avoiding regulatory action. And the CNSC reliance on industry studies, assessments, is vulnerable to this. So to balance things out, let's talk about a risk contributor that hasn't been given adequate attention given its importance. That is multi-unit risk. In my February letter, I provided the Commission with estimates of site-wide risk for the Pickering and Darlington reactors. I acquired this through access to information. In my view, this information should have been provided to last year's Commission hearings on the Pickering relicensing. This is troubling because the Pickering station is in the realm, clearly, as you see on screen, of unreasonable risk in almost all of staff's scenarios. That said, what is also informative about the graph is that CNSC staff internally assume ranges of efficiency, or you could say uncertainty, on the effectiveness of EMEs to reduce large release frequency. In the current license application, however, there are no such ranges provided. I urge the Commission to ask why. So that said, my February letter asked the Commission staff to provide their estimates for the Bruce site. Again, they did not respond to this request. So in absence of a response, I adapted the staff's site-wide risk equation to produce estimates for the Bruce site. That's what you see on screen. Because I was unsure of the multiplier staff would use for the Bruce designs, I included a high and low scenario based on previous assumptions. That said, the ranges show that in almost all of the scenarios, the site-wide risk posed by the station exceeds traditional limits. In my view, this needs to be factored into your deliberations, especially because Bruce Power has worked over the past year to lower the LRF through all sorts of pencil sharpening. It should also be factored into the review of the Bruce A life extension. In conclusion, the risk from the Bruce nuclear station is dominated by containment bypass accidents that lead to severe radiation releases within the first 24 hours. This contravenes international and Canadian guidelines for new reactor design and off-site emergency plans. Under the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, this requires action by the Commission to prevent unreasonable risk. I anticipate that the response to my conclusion will be something like, yes, but we changed the assumptions of the study. But as I've outlined today, evidence suggests staff's review of these changes has not been thorough or transparent. Given the risks initially identified, I believe this requires additional oversight by the Commission and the public. Moreover, while the CNSC is not an economic regulator, it should be cognizant that Bruce Power is under a lot of pressure to reduce cost of the Bruce Day refurbishment. In Greenpeace's view, this is a risk to safety. On screen, you'll see a 2005 citation from Hydro-Québec in French, where they told the Commission staff that the economic case for Gentilly 2 was weak and depended on the safety standards applied. As you know, Hydro-Québec decided to close Gentilly after the cost topped $4 billion. It should be noted that the Bruce Power had already signed a contract with the province to rebuild the remaining Bruce A reactors, but has invoked a clause in its contract to allow it to renegotiate if the cost topped $3 billion. I say this because I think the Commission needs to insulate its decisions on safety upgrades from Bruce Power's current financial pressures. I think the way to do this is for the Commission and the public to keep a close eye on the pencil sharpener and provide oversight to both staff and Bruce Power. As noted, I believe the best way to do this is for a shorter license for Bruce A, so a hearing, including written and oral submissions, can take place to review the life extension plans. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take questions, and I'm sorry for the rapid initial presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.